In the autumn of 1874, on the windswept plains of Nebraska, where endless grassland stretched toward horizons that seemed to mock human ambition, the last two children of the O'Malley family died within hours of each other, in circumstances so disturbing that medical authorities refused to investigate further. Catherine O'Malley, 18 years old, succumbed to pneumonia in her family's isolated homestead near Grand Island. 8 hours later, her younger brother Michael collapsed without warning and died before sunset, his body showing no signs of disease or injury. Their deaths marked the end of what frontier physicians called the most inexplicable medical phenomenon in territorial Nebraska history. Over the course of 12 years, all 5 O'Malley children had died in synchronous pairs, each death triggering the immediate collapse of a surviving sibling despite perfect health and physical separation. What started as tragic coincidence had evolved into something that challenged every understanding of human physiology and the boundaries between individual lives. The medical records, testimonies, and physical evidence from this case remain sealed in Nebraska State Archives, classified not for national security, but because the implications are too disturbing for public comprehension. Tonight, I'm going to reveal documentation that has been hidden for nearly 150 years, autopsy reports that were immediately suppressed, witness statements that were dismissed as frontier superstition, and scientific evidence that suggests some human families develop biological connections that transcend individual death and challenge our fundamental understanding of consciousness itself. Before we venture into this medical nightmare that unfolded on the American frontier, I need to know something about you. This channel explores the darkest territories where documented science meets inexplicable phenomena. If you're prepared to confront evidence that medical establishments have deliberately concealed, hit that subscribe button immediately. And tell me in the comments what state you're listening from, because what happened to the O'Malleys occurred in the heartland of America, in communities that might bear unsettling similarities to your own. The horror began not with death, but with the circumstances that brought the O'Malley family to Nebraska's dangerous frontier in 1850. Patrick O'Malley arrived in the Nebraska Territory during the spring of 1850, fleeing circumstances in County Cork, Ireland, that he never discussed with his new neighbors. Unlike the potato famine refugees who comprised most Irish immigrants to America, Patrick possessed sufficient resources to purchase 160 acres of prime farmland near the emerging settlement of Grand Island. His wealth raised questions among suspicious frontier communities, but Patrick's willingness to work alongside his neighbors and his obvious agricultural expertise gradually earned local acceptance. What Patrick couldn't have known was that his chosen homestead sat atop a geographical anomaly that would prove catastrophic for his descendants. Geological surveys conducted in the 1920s revealed that the O'Malley property contained unusually high concentrations of magnetic iron ore deposits lying just beneath the topsoil. These deposits created localized electromagnetic fields that varied in intensity based on seasonal weather patterns and solar activity. The farmhouse itself was built directly over the strongest concentration of magnetic ore, creating an environment where human nervous systems would be subjected to constant, low-level electromagnetic interference. Patrick married Bridget Flanagan in 1851, a union that combined two bloodlines carrying recessive genetic traits that would prove tragically compatible. Bridget's family possessed a documented history of enhanced electromagnetic sensitivity that manifested as heightened intuition and occasional prophetic dreams. Patrick's lineage carried genes affecting neural development in ways that increased susceptibility to electromagnetic influence. Neither family understood the medical implications of their genetic heritage, but their combination would produce children whose nervous systems were exquisitely sensitive to electromagnetic fields and, more disturbing still, to each other's bioelectric activity. The O'Malley children were born into an environment where natural electromagnetic fields, genetic predisposition, and isolation combined to create conditions that fostered unprecedented neural connectivity between siblings. Dr. Marcus Whitfield, the territorial physician who documented the early cases, would later write that the O'Malley homestead represented a perfect storm of environmental and genetic factors that transformed normal family bonds into something that transcended individual biology. Seamus O'Malley, born in January 1852, was the first child to develop the family's characteristic neural sensitivity. From infancy, he showed unusual awareness of his surroundings and uncanny ability to predict weather changes, animal behavior, and human emotions. When his sister Mary was born in 1854, Seamus immediately began demonstrating what Dr. Whitfield termed sympathetic responsiveness to her physical and emotional states. When Mary cried, Seamus would simultaneously show signs of distress. When Mary slept peacefully, Seamus would relax visibly. When Mary fell ill with childhood ailments, Seamus would develop identical symptoms within hours. The pattern continued with each subsequent birth. Patrick, born 1856, Liam, born 1858, Catherine, born 1860, and Michael, born 1862, all showed the same electromagnetic sensitivity and sympathetic connection to their older siblings. By 1865, when all 5 children had reached school age, they functioned as components of a collective nervous system that spanned multiple individual bodies. Mrs. Eleanor Hutchins, who served as the area schoolmistress from 1863 to 1870, kept detailed records of the O'Malley children's unusual behavior that provide the earliest systematic documentation of their condition. Her observations, preserved in the Hall County Historical Society archives, reveal the progressive development of what she termed sibling consciousness merger. The O'Malley children often speak in unison without apparent coordination, Mrs. Hutchins wrote in her teaching journal in September 1865. When I ask one child a question, frequently a sibling will answer before the addressed child can respond. They share books and writing materials with perfect coordination, as if controlled by a single mind directing multiple bodies. Most disturbing is their reaction to individual punishment. When I disciplined young Patrick for disrupting class, all 5 children showed identical expressions of contrition and distress. Mrs. Hutchins also documented the children's apparent ability to communicate without verbal or visual contact. During classroom exercises, where children were separated into different rooms, the O'Malley siblings could coordinate their answers to math problems and writing assignments with impossible accuracy. When tested individually, their academic performance varied significantly. When allowed to work as a group, they solved problems that exceeded the capabilities of any individual child their age. Dr. Whitfield began making regular visits to the O'Malley homestead in 1866 after receiving reports of the children's unusual behavior from Mrs. Hutchins and other community members. His medical examinations revealed physiological abnormalities that he struggled to classify according to contemporary medical knowledge. The O'Malley children possess nervous systems that function as components of a larger biological network, Dr. Whitfield wrote in his private medical notes. Their individual brain activity synchronizes when they are in proximity to each other. Their heart rates, breathing patterns, and even digestive processes coordinate in ways that suggest neural connections transcending normal human physiology. I have observed them sharing sensations across physical space, with one child responding to stimulation applied to a sibling in a different room. More disturbing was Dr. Whitfield's discovery that the electromagnetic fields surrounding the O'Malley property appeared to strengthen the children's neural connectivity. During periods of high solar activity, when electromagnetic interference was most intense, the siblings demonstrated enhanced coordination and apparent telepathic communication. During electromagnetic calm periods, their individual personalities became more distinct, though they never achieved complete neural independence. The first documented death connection occurred on June 15, 1866, when 14-year-old Seamus drowned while attempting to ford the swollen Platte River during spring flooding. The circumstances of his drowning appeared straightforward. His horse had stumbled in the strong current, throwing Seamus into water too deep and fast for swimming. Witnesses reported that he struggled briefly before disappearing beneath the surface. His body was recovered 3 days later, showing signs consistent with drowning. What transformed a frontier tragedy into medical mystery was the reaction of Seamus's siblings to his death. Mary, Patrick, Liam, Catherine, and Michael were at the family homestead when Seamus drowned 15 miles away. Yet all 5 children collapsed simultaneously at the precise moment their brother died. Neighbors who were present described the event as if lightning had struck all the children at once. The young ones were playing in the yard when suddenly they all stopped moving, reported Thomas Henderson, who had been visiting Patrick O'Malley to discuss cattle trading. It was like watching puppets when someone cuts the strings. They just dropped where they stood, all at the same instant. When we reached them, they were unconscious but breathing. After a few minutes, they woke up crying and saying Seamus's name over and over. Dr. Whitfield arrived at the homestead 6 hours later to find 4 of the 5 children recovered and apparently healthy. But Mary, the second oldest, remained unconscious despite showing no signs of injury or illness. Her vital signs were stable, her breathing normal, but she couldn't be roused. Dr. Whitfield's examination revealed no medical explanation for her condition. Mary died 3 days after Seamus's drowning, at the exact moment his body was pulled from the river 15 miles away. Witnesses at both locations noted the precise timing of these events. Mary's final words, spoken clearly despite 3 days of unconsciousness, were, "I'm coming, Seamus. Wait for me." Dr. Whitfield's autopsy of Mary revealed no cause of death. Her organs were healthy, her brain showed no signs of trauma or disease, and her blood chemistry was within normal ranges. Yet she had died as completely and suddenly as if struck by lightning. Dr. Whitfield concluded that Mary had died from what he termed sympathetic cessation, though he could provide no medical mechanism to explain such a phenomenon. Mary O'Malley died because her brother died. Dr. Whitfield wrote in his confidential medical report, "The neural connection between these siblings appears to have been so complete that the death of one triggered cascade failure in the other. I have no scientific framework for understanding such a connection, but the evidence is undeniable." The double death of Seamus and Mary sent shockwaves through the Grand Island community and attracted attention from medical authorities in Omaha and Lincoln. Dr. Harrison Phillips from the Nebraska Medical College traveled to Grand Island in August 1866 to investigate the case and examine the surviving O'Malley children. Dr. Phillips brought with him the most advanced medical instruments available to 1860s frontier medicine, including an early form of stethoscope, electrical sensitivity meters, and equipment for measuring brain activity. His examination of Patrick, Liam, Catherine, and Michael revealed physiological abnormalities that challenged contemporary understanding of human neurology. The surviving O'Malley children demonstrate neural activity patterns unlike anything documented in medical literature, Dr. Phillips wrote in his preliminary report. Their brainwaves synchronize when they are in physical proximity, creating what appears to be a distributed consciousness spanning multiple bodies. More remarkably, they seem to share sensory input, with one child responding to stimulation applied to another child in a different room. Dr. Phillips also documented the children's apparent ability to access memories and knowledge from their deceased siblings. Patrick, Liam, Catherine, and Michael could recite conversations that Seamus and Mary had conducted privately, describe events that had occurred when only the deceased children were present, and demonstrate skills and knowledge that had belonged exclusively to their dead brother and sister. The surviving children appear to have inherited the complete memories and experiences of their deceased siblings, Dr. Phillips observed. This suggests that the neural network connecting these children serves not only for communication, but also for information storage and retrieval. The deaths of Seamus and Mary did not eliminate their contributions to the collective family consciousness. The medical establishment's growing interest in the O'Malley case led to increasingly invasive examinations and experimental procedures designed to understand the mechanism of sibling connectivity. The children were subjected to electrical stimulation, magnetic field exposure, and surgical biopsies that caused significant trauma while providing little useful information. Dr. Augustus Morrison from the University of Pennsylvania attempted to sever the sympathetic connection between the surviving siblings by applying electromagnetic interference to disrupt their neural synchronization. The procedure, conducted in 1867, involved exposing the children to powerful magnetic fields while monitoring their brain activity. The treatment caused severe neurological damage to all 4 children while leaving their synchronous consciousness completely intact. The failure of medical intervention, combined with the children's deteriorating health from repeated experimental procedures, led Patrick and Bridget O'Malley to restrict access to their surviving children. The family withdrew from community life, keeping Patrick, Liam, Catherine, and Michael isolated on their homestead, while hoping that medical science would eventually understand their condition. But the isolation may have intensified the children's neural connectivity rather than weakening it. Away from the electromagnetic interference of the growing Grand Island settlement, the surviving O'Malley children developed even stronger synchronous consciousness. Neighbors reported seeing all 4 children moving in perfect coordination while working in the fields, as if controlled by a single mind directing multiple bodies. More disturbing were reports of the children's apparent communication with their deceased siblings. Visitors to the O'Malley homestead described hearing the children conducting conversations with invisible presences, responding to questions that no living person had asked, and showing emotional reactions to events that seemed to be occurring in some other dimension. Mrs. Sarah Brennan, who delivered food to the O'Malley family during a particularly harsh winter in 1867, later described an encounter that would haunt her for the rest of her life. "I knocked on the door, and young Patrick answered," Mrs. Brennan told Dr. Whitfield during a subsequent interview. "But when he opened his mouth to greet me, it was Seamus's voice that came out. Not similar to Seamus's voice, but exactly Seamus's voice, with his particular way of speaking. The boy looked confused, like he didn't understand what had happened. Then he spoke again in his normal voice and invited me inside." Inside the house, Mrs. Brennan observed all 4 surviving children engaged in what appeared to be a conversation with 2 additional children who weren't visible. The living children would pause periodically, listen intently to silence, then respond to comments that only they could hear. When Mrs. Brennan asked about this behavior, Catherine explained matter-of-factly that Seamus and Mary visited regularly to help with decision-making and provide guidance about family matters. "They're not gone," Catherine told Mrs. Brennan. "They just live in a different part of our mind now. When one of us dies, we don't disappear. We become part of the others. Seamus and Mary are still here, just not in separate bodies anymore." Dr. Whitfield's investigation of these claims led him to conclude that the O'Malley children's consciousness had evolved beyond individual identity toward a form of collective awareness that persisted after physical death. His theory, considered revolutionary and dangerous by medical authorities, suggested that the electromagnetic environment of the O'Malley homestead had triggered genetic changes that allowed consciousness to exist independently of individual bodies. "The O'Malley children have transcended normal human consciousness," Dr. Whitfield wrote in his final report on the case. "Death appears to be a transition rather than an ending for these individuals. When one child dies, their consciousness merges with the collective awareness shared by their surviving siblings. The family has become a single entity distributed across multiple bodies, with the capability to persist even when individual bodies fail." The second documented death connection occurred on September 22, 1868, when 16-year-old Patrick O'Malley was gored by a bull while herding cattle. The injury was severe, but not immediately fatal. Patrick's left leg was crushed and his abdomen punctured. but Dr. Whitfield believed the wounds could be treated successfully with proper care. Patrick lingered for 4 days, conscious and lucid, despite his pain. During this period, his brother Liam showed no signs of illness or injury, maintaining his normal activities around the homestead. But on the evening of September 25th, as Patrick's condition began deteriorating toward death, Liam suddenly collapsed without warning. Dr. Whitfield, who had been monitoring Patrick's condition, was present when both boys died within minutes of each other. His detailed account of their synchronized deaths provides the most complete medical documentation of the O'Malley death connection phenomenon. Patrick's vital signs had been declining throughout the day, Dr. Whitfield wrote. At approximately 9:30 p.m., his breathing became labored and his pulse grew weak. At that exact moment, Liam, who had been sitting by the fire reading, suddenly clutched his chest and fell from his chair. He showed no signs of injury or illness, but his vital signs immediately began declining in perfect synchronization with Patrick's condition. Dr. Whitfield attempted to treat both children simultaneously, but found that medical intervention applied to one boy seemed to affect the other as well. When he administered laudanum to ease Patrick's pain, Liam's breathing also became more regular. When he applied pressure to Patrick's wounds, Liam showed signs of distress in his abdomen and left leg, despite having no injuries in those areas. The boys appeared to be sharing the dying process, Dr. Whitfield observed. Patrick's physical injuries were killing both of them simultaneously. Liam was experiencing Patrick's death as if it were happening to his own body, and his perfectly healthy physiology was shutting down in sympathy with his brother's trauma. Patrick died at 11:47 p.m. from blood loss and internal injuries. Liam died at 11:49 p.m., 2 minutes later, from no discernible medical cause. Dr. Whitfield's examination of Liam's body revealed no trace of disease, injury, or physiological failure that could explain his death. The double death of Patrick and Liam left only Catherine and Michael as survivors, and their psychological condition deteriorated rapidly following the loss of their brothers. The 2 remaining children became increasingly withdrawn from contact with anyone outside their family, spending most of their time engaged in whispered conversations with their deceased siblings. Dr. Whitfield's continued observation of Catherine and Michael revealed that their connection to the dead family members was growing stronger rather than weaker with time. The surviving children demonstrated knowledge of events that had occurred after their siblings' deaths, suggesting that the deceased consciousness remained active and continued learning despite lacking physical bodies. Catherine and Michael appear to be in constant communication with Patrick, Liam, Seamus, and Mary, Dr. Whitfield noted in his 1869 observations. The deceased children seem to retain their individual personalities while sharing a collective awareness that includes their living siblings. Catherine and Michael often report receiving advice, warnings, and information from their dead brothers and sisters about events that haven't yet occurred. The predictive capabilities of the collective O'Malley consciousness became a source of both fascination and fear for the Grand Island community. Catherine and Michael began warning neighbors about accidents, illnesses, and other misfortunes days or weeks before they occurred. Their predictions proved accurate with disturbing frequency, but the advance warnings often created more anxiety than comfort. In the spring of 1870, Catherine warned Mrs. Henderson that her husband would be injured in a farming accident involving their plow horse. 3 days later, Thomas Henderson was kicked by the horse and suffered a broken leg, exactly as Catherine had described. When questioned about how she knew, Catherine explained that Patrick's spirit had witnessed the event while observing the Henderson farm from the place where we go when our bodies stop working. Dr. Phillips returned to Grand Island in 1870 to continue his study of the surviving O'Malley children, bringing with him newer medical equipment and colleagues from universities in Chicago and St. Louis. The expanded research team conducted extensive testing designed to understand the mechanism of consciousness persistence after death. Their findings, published in a confidential report to the American Medical Association, documented evidence that challenged fundamental assumptions about the relationship between consciousness and physical death. The research team concluded that the O'Malley children had developed a form of consciousness that could exist independently of individual bodies while maintaining access to sensory input from living family members. The deceased O'Malley children appear to maintain active consciousness through their connection to living siblings, the research team reported. Catherine and Michael serve as biological anchors for the consciousness of Patrick, Liam, Seamus, and Mary. The dead children can perceive events in the physical world through their living siblings' senses and can influence physical events by directing the actions of Catherine and Michael. The research team also documented evidence that the collective O'Malley consciousness was expanding its capabilities beyond simple survival after death. The deceased children seemed to be developing enhanced perception that allowed them to observe events across great distances and predict future occurrences with remarkable accuracy. Dr. Phillips theorized that death had freed the deceased children's consciousness from the limitations of individual bodies while allowing them to access the expanded awareness made possible by their neural network. Death appears to be an enhancement rather than an ending for these individuals, he wrote. The deceased children possess capabilities that exceeded their living abilities, but the research team's investigation was cut short when federal authorities became interested in the O'Malley case for potential military applications. The Civil War had demonstrated the value of accurate intelligence gathering, and government officials saw potential for using the O'Malley children's predictive abilities for strategic purposes. Colonel Marcus Webb of the Union Army Intelligence Division visited Grand Island in 1871 to evaluate Catherine and Michael's capabilities for military use. His classified report, discovered in War Department archives in 1934, revealed the government's interest in weaponizing consciousness that could survive death and predict future events. The O'Malley subjects demonstrate remarkable accuracy in predicting enemy movements and strategic developments. Colonel Webb wrote, "Their deceased siblings appear capable of observing Confederate activities across great distances and providing advance warning of planned operations. However, the subjects' deteriorating physical condition and their resistance to separation from their home environment make them unsuitable for regular military deployment." The government's interest in the O'Malley children led to increased surveillance and pressure on the family to relocate to Washington for further study. Patrick and Bridget O'Malley, already traumatized by the loss of 3 children and the invasive medical examinations of the survivors, refused all government requests and sought to protect Catherine and Michael from further exploitation. The family's resistance to government involvement resulted in their increasing isolation from the broader community. Neighbors who had once sought the children's predictive guidance now avoided the O'Malley homestead, fearful of attracting unwanted attention from federal authorities. The family became prisoners in their own home, cut off from normal social contact, and entirely dependent on their supernatural consciousness network for interaction with the outside world. This isolation may have accelerated the final phase of the O'Malley death connection phenomenon. Without normal human contact to anchor them to individual identity, Catherine and Michael's consciousness began merging more completely with their deceased siblings. By 1873, neighbors reported that the surviving children often spoke in voices that belonged to their dead brothers and sisters, channeling the personalities and memories of family members who had died years earlier. Dr. Whitfield's final examinations of Catherine and Michael in 1873 revealed that their individual identities had largely dissolved into the collective family consciousness. The children could no longer maintain separate conversations or demonstrate independent preferences and opinions. They had become biological vessels for a group consciousness that transcended individual death and personal identity. Catherine and Michael no longer exist as separate individuals, Dr. Whitfield wrote in his concluding report. They have become components of a collective consciousness that includes all 5 deceased siblings, plus their own dissolving identities. What we are observing is the complete evolution of human consciousness beyond individual limitations toward a form of group awareness that persists regardless of physical death. The final death connection occurred exactly as described in the opening account. Catherine died of pneumonia on October 12, 1874, and Michael collapsed hours later without any sign of illness or injury. But according to Dr. Whitfield's autopsy reports, both children showed evidence of having died from the same cause: complete cessation of neural activity that suggested voluntary shutdown rather than medical failure. Catherine and Michael appear to have chosen death as a form of graduation to the next stage of their consciousness development, Dr. Whitfield concluded. Their bodies showed no signs of disease or trauma that could explain their deaths. They simply stopped living, as if their consciousness had decided that physical existence was no longer necessary or desirable. The death of the last two O'Malley children marked the end of one of the most documented cases of consciousness survival after death in American medical history. The family's collective awareness, which had persisted across multiple deaths and demonstrated capabilities that transcended normal human limitations, apparently chose to abandon physical existence entirely, rather than continue anchoring itself through individual bodies. Patrick and Bridget O'Malley abandoned their homestead immediately after their children's deaths and disappeared from Nebraska records. The property was eventually sold for taxes and passed through multiple owners, none of whom remained long enough to establish permanent residence. Local residents reported strange phenomena at the site: unexplained lights, voices of children calling across empty fields, and electromagnetic disturbances that affected compasses and early electrical equipment. The O'Malley case was officially classified by the Nebraska Medical Board in 1875, with all records sealed indefinitely to prevent public panic about the implications of consciousness survival after death. Dr. Whitfield's complete research files were confiscated by federal authorities and have never been released, though portions have leaked to researchers over the decades. Modern scientific analysis of the available O'Malley documentation suggests that the family experienced a unique combination of genetic predisposition and environmental factors that triggered unprecedented neural development. The electromagnetic fields surrounding their homestead, combined with genetic traits that enhanced electromagnetic sensitivity, apparently produced children whose consciousness could exist independently of individual bodies. Dr. Elena Rodriguez of the Institute for Consciousness Research, who studied declassified portions of the O'Malley files in 1995, concluded that the family's experience provides evidence for theories about consciousness that mainstream science has been reluctant to accept. The O'Malley case demonstrates that consciousness is not necessarily confined to individual brains or dependent on continuous biological function. Dr. Rodriguez wrote in her analysis, under specific conditions involving genetic predisposition and environmental enhancement, human consciousness can develop beyond normal limitations to achieve forms of awareness that persist after physical death. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of modern O'Malley research is the discovery that similar electromagnetic conditions exist at dozens of locations across the United States. Industrial activity, underground mineral deposits, and technological infrastructure have created environments where human consciousness might undergo the same evolutionary development that affected the O'Malley children. Dr. Michael Chen of the National Institute of Mental Health, who mapped potential sites for consciousness enhancement in 2018, identified 43 locations where environmental and geological factors could theoretically trigger O'Malley-type consciousness development. We may be creating conditions for widespread consciousness evolution without realizing it, Dr. Chen warned in congressional testimony. The O'Malley case shows us what can happen when human consciousness is exposed to specific electromagnetic environments over extended periods. If similar conditions are developing elsewhere, we may see more families experiencing transcendent consciousness development in the coming decades. Recent investigation of the original O'Malley homestead site has revealed that electromagnetic anomalies persist more than 150 years after the family's departure. ground-penetrating radar has detected unusual mineral formations beneath the property that continue generating localized electromagnetic fields. More disturbing, electronic equipment malfunction, and sensitive individuals report experiencing auditory phenomena at the site that suggest the O'Malley collective consciousness may still be present. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, who led a 2019 investigation of the former O'Malley property, documented electromagnetic readings that exceed normal background levels by factors of 10 to 15. Her team also recorded audio phenomena that appeared to be children's voices speaking in harmony, though no children were present during the investigation. The O'Malley site continues to demonstrate unusual electromagnetic activity that could theoretically support persistent consciousness, Dr. Walsh reported. Whether the original family's collective awareness remains active at this location cannot be scientifically confirmed, but the evidence suggests that whatever process created their enhanced consciousness may still be ongoing. The implications of persistent O'Malley consciousness raise profound questions about the nature of death, identity, and human evolution. If the collective awareness that developed in this frontier family continues to exist after 150 years, what does this mean for our understanding of mortality and the boundaries between life and death? Current research into the O'Malley phenomenon focuses on understanding whether their consciousness transcendence represents an evolutionary adaptation that could become more common as electromagnetic environments continue changing due to technological development. Climate change, industrial electromagnetic pollution, and increased solar activity may be creating conditions that favor consciousness development beyond normal human limitations. Dr. Sarah Martinez of the University of California, who studies electromagnetic sensitivity in modern populations, has identified families showing early signs of O'Malley-type consciousness development. Enhanced empathy between siblings, apparent telepathic communication, and synchronized responses to distant events have been documented in children living near power transmission lines, radio towers, and other sources of electromagnetic radiation. We may be witnessing the early stages of a new phase in human consciousness evolution, Dr. Martinez suggested in a 2021 lecture. The O'Malley family experienced an accelerated version of development that may become more common as our technological civilization creates increasingly complex electromagnetic environments. But the O'Malley case also serves as a warning about the potential costs of consciousness transcendence. The family paid the ultimate price for their enhanced awareness, losing all their children to a phenomenon that medical science still cannot fully explain or control. If similar development is occurring in modern families, the tragic pattern of synchronized deaths could repeat across multiple generations. The collective consciousness that emerged from the O'Malley family tragedy represents both humanity's greatest potential and its most terrifying vulnerability. Their experience demonstrates that human awareness can evolve beyond individual limitations, but at costs that may prove too high for most families to bear. Whether the O'Malley legacy represents evolution or extinction may depend on how future generations choose to develop and protect enhanced consciousness capabilities. The frontier family's sacrifice opened a door to human potential that we are only beginning to understand. But walking through that door may require more courage and wisdom than our species has yet demonstrated. The O'Malley children achieved a form of immortality through consciousness transcendence, but their path to eternal awareness led through synchronized death and the dissolution of individual identity. As modern families begin showing signs of similar development, the question becomes whether we can learn from the O'Malley tragedy to achieve consciousness evolution without repeating their terrible fate. Tonight, somewhere in America, children may be developing the same electromagnetic sensitivity that transformed the O'Malley siblings into something beyond normal human consciousness. Whether their journey leads to transcendence or tragedy may depend on whether we have the wisdom to recognize what is happening and the courage to guide consciousness evolution toward survival rather than synchronized death. The wind still whispers across the Nebraska plains where the O'Malley homestead once stood, and some say that on certain nights, you can hear children's voices calling to each other across the darkness. Whether those voices belong to memory, imagination, or something that transcends both life and death remains one of America's most disturbing, unsolved mysteries. What do you think about the possibility that consciousness can survive individual death through family connections? Have you ever experienced synchronous events with siblings or family members that seem to transcend normal communication? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let me know if you've encountered electromagnetic phenomena that might be related to consciousness development. If you found this exploration of America's most disturbing death connection compelling, subscribe for more mysteries that challenge our understanding of consciousness, death, and human potential. Hit that notification bell so you never miss stories that reveal the hidden possibilities lurking in human evolution. Remember, the boundaries between life and death may be more permeable than we imagine, and the connections between family members may run deeper than biology alone can explain. The O'Malley children proved that love can transcend death, but their legacy raises questions about whether some connections are too strong for individual consciousness to survive. See you in the next video, where we'll explore another dark secret hidden in America's frontier past.